Hey guys, back with another video today. We're going to go through another game between two grandmasters for this one. And here we have Boris Gelfand with the white pieces and the man himself, Hikaru Nakamura, playing with the black pieces. Um, Hikaru plays the King's Indian defense here, and we'll go through some of the basics and moves in that opening, but not really the reason why I wanted to show this one off. The reason I wanted to show this is because after the openings, this game turns into a beautiful attack and a master class on how to attack your opponent's castle's king. So delivered by Hikaru. So wanted to show that off for you guys, and I think we should just go ahead and get started with this one. So white starts with d4. We have knight f6, c4, and g6, preparing the King's Indian opening. We have knight to c3 and bishop to g7. This is kind of the first couple moves in the King's Indian. And we have e4. So you'll notice that white has a very strong pawn center here, but black is aiming to basically attack this center from afar with his pieces in the opening. Okay, d6, knight to f3, castling by black, and bishop to e2, preparing castling for white as well. And now we have e5, which is a very important pawn thrust here in the opening for black, fighting in the center. Now before I show that, it might look here like white can actually win a pawn because black's down in defender, but not the case. So if white takes the pawn here, thinking he's won a pawn, black can play knight to e4, and he's opening up this diagonal for the bishop, attacking this undefended knight. So it basically ends in an even exchange after all that, which white is not really aiming for in the opening. White wants an advantage. So instead of doing that, white castles here. And we have knight to c6, and pawn basically kicking this knight away, back to e7. And white plays knight back to d2. And black plays knight back to e8. So one thing to notice here is this pawn chain that's starting to form in the center for black. And one thing to remember is oftentimes you want to attack in the direction of your pawn chain. So in this case, this is leading towards a kingside attack for black here. And it's an important move playing the knight back to e8 because you're allowing another pawn push here towards the king and also opening up this rook. So that was probably Hikaru's plan here. White plays b4, and we have f5. And c5, knight to f6. So notice this knight basically went back and forth here, but now this knight is behind the pawn instead of in front of the pawn. So there's a little bit more coordination going on there. f3 for white, basically strengthening this pawn chain, and Hikaru just plays f4. And now you can see even more definitively what this pawn chain looks like and where this is pointing, where this is headed. So white plays knight to c4, and we have g5, a4, lots of pawn moves, and knight to g6. And white plays bishop to a3, so you can see white's kind of developing his pieces along the queen side here. He's got both these knights, this bishop, a lot of pawns pushed forward, whereas black is kind of aiming towards the other side. And notice that this side has a king, and the other side here for black does not. So that can be kind of important. A very important move in the King's Indian opening is rook to f7. So he's basically allowing this bishop to come out at some point and moving his rook into the action here on the king side. Okay, we have b5. We have d captures on c5. Bishop captures. And h5. So look at how advanced a lot of these pawns are. And we're only, 17 moves into the game. And this will continue. We've got a5 for white. We've got g4. And another pawn push. And now Hikaru plays g3. Like, look at these pawns here. And look how advanced they are. And look how close they are to this opponent's king. But how do you continue this attack, really, for black? Let's find out what Hikaru's plan is. Actually, a very simple plan here, let's say, is with this pawn here on g3 being defended. A simple plan could be moving the knight out of the way somewhere. Okay, bringing the queen over to h4, and notice that you can deliver checkmate here on h2 if nothing else, if white does not take the proper precautions to defend against that. So kind of prophylactically here, white moves his king out of the way. The reason is to bring the bishop over to g2 to defend this square here. And a lot of times, I mean, one thought that many players might have is to push h3 here. So you're kind of preventing that queen from getting on the square, but notice this bishop on c8 for black. In many situations, this bishop can sacrifice itself in this position, basically breaking up this pawn chain, opening up attack on this king, and can be very dangerous for white. So this is already looking pretty dangerous here. But we'll have to see how this continues. So Hikaru plays the bishop back to f8, and offering a trade of bishops here, also allowing his rook to basically come into the g file, the h file, to put on even more pressure. But white pushes his pawn to d6. Hikaru captures on b6, and now the bishop comes back to g2, to g1, sorry, defending this square, just like we talked about. And now Hikaru plays knight to h4, so bringing some pieces even closer to the king. And white plays rook to e1, and now immediately in this position, Hikaru just sacrifices the knight, basically trying to open up some lines and really start attacking the king here. And white plays now probably his most inaccurate move, or biggest mistake of the game, which is pawn captures on c7. And it's threatening the queen here, and I think white's probably mistake here was thinking that black has to react to this move before doing anything else. So why don't you take a look at this, pause the video, and see if you were playing as black here, is there anything, does black actually need to respect this, or is there another move that's even better for black here? And think of attacking moves. Think of moves that threaten checkmate for white's king. Okay. So the move that Hikaru played was knight captures on e1. And the reason this works is because even if white captures the queen here, white's got two queens, but there's checkmate in one here for black, and there's nothing he can do about it. Black, all he has to do is play g2. And this knight is defending this pawn, which is delivering checkmate on this poor king right in the corner of the board here. So after this move here of knight captures on e1, white's got to respect this. He cannot take the queen yet. So black has to recapture. And now, moving forward with this theme of attacking, Hikaru keeps going. He plays g2 check with the pawn, sacrificing the pawn, but he's forcing a move here, and he's opening up the king even further for white. So white is forced to take on g2. And now Hikaru plays g7 check with the rook, activating the rook. You know, these are all forcing moves, and they're all attacking moves, and this is going to continue for basically the rest of this game. So just to show you how dangerous even just this rook move is, there's only one place this king can go to avoid a forced checkmate. So if white goes back here, then there's a couple of checkmates here, but the first is bishop h3 check. King is forced to go here, let's say, and there's even more lines here. You can play rook to g2 check, and if king goes back, this is checkmate, so that's one. You can also play bishop here to c5, dark squared bishop attacking the king this way. And after the only move possible, which is defending with the knight, we've got another checkmate here. So king to f1 clearly doesn't work. And it's kind of similar if he goes to f2. So you can play bishop here. This is mate in 1. So let's say he goes here. You bring the light squared bishop into h3, and this is checkmate. Notice how important this pawn is on f4. Basically, not allowing white's king to escape in any way. He's also kind of choked out by his own pieces here. But both of these moves don't work. He can't go here, and he can't go here. So there's only one move for white. He's got to go back to h1, and that's what white does. But Hikaru finds another brilliant move. So, let's see. Why don't you guys pause the video again or think about it? What's another move here that is a very aggressive move, an attacking move that is really great in this game that you guys might be able to find. And I'll give you hints, it brings another piece into the game as well for black that hasn't moved yet in the game. So the move is bishop to h3. So again, threatening checkmate on the very next move. If white makes some move here, this is basically checkmate. This is checkmate. So he's got to respect this as well. And one of the only moves that white can possibly make here is bringing the bishop back to f1, attacking this bishop and defending the square. But now here, Hikaru just plays a brilliant move, like my favorite move of the game. And that move is queen to d3. So it's just so beautiful because let's say white decides to take that queen. Well, we've just discussed this is checkmate, so that game over for white. Can't do that. Now what happens if he decides to take the bishop here, which was threatening checkmate on the move earlier? Well, then we've got queen to f3 check. And then once the bishop blocks, we've got checkmate. So it's just bringing the queen into a game in such an attacking position. And just like totally choking out white and not allowing him to breathe. Basically for the last however many moves, white has been struggling to survive in this game. So white plays knight to e5, attacking the queen. And again, black not caring, Hikaru not caring about, go ahead, capture my queen, see what happens. He takes the bishop on f1. And now again, if white takes the queen here, we've got checkmate. So all these forcing moves in a row. So again, white has to react to this. He can't take the queen. So he's got to take it back with his queen. And now Hikaru takes the undefended knight here. He's got a double attack. And basically there's a couple of more forced moves here. But white resigns in this position, being down an entire piece in the endgame. It didn't end with the fireworks that you might be expecting, but because white didn't fall for a lot of these booby traps that Hikaru was playing. But I just thought this was a brilliant example of how a grandmaster might threaten his opponent and how he might just continue to apply pressure, move after move, starting with all of these pawn pushes towards the white king and just ending in some great moves to end the game. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I'll see you guys next time.